people who know better, including Republican members of this body, have to have the courage to stand up and speak the truth, not be cowed by mean tweets or fear of their base. There is a truth, and they're not telling it. Their silence is shameful.
Back with us, Jennifer Rubin and Jason Johnson. And Jennifer, I am fascinated by the first announced Republican retirement. There's 22 Republican seats up, so many more than Democrats. So we're going to have more Republicans announcing that they're not going to run for re-election. Each one of those Republicans is a potential danger to Donald Trump if they are no longer worried about appealing to Trump voters themselves.
Although the Republicans didn't make progress in the Senate, in some ways, I think the Democrats didn't make progress. In some ways, I think the Democrats are much better positioned this time to push back. For one thing, one of those Republicans is Mitt Romney. Mm-hmm. We don't know how he's going to behave. We've been disappointed many times before, but he could decide, hey, what have I got to lose? I'm here. This is the capstone of my career. I could be independent. I could stand up to this guy. I could absolutely see him playing that role. You have people like Lamar Alexander, who was always a moderate, who was always a deal maker. He got a renewal of No Child Left Behind through the Senate, for example. He's always been someone who Democrats liked and kind of a gentleman in the same way that Bob Corker was. So you could see him. And then you have a handful of Republicans who are in purple or blue states, a Cory Gardner from Colorado, who's going to be in a lot of trouble. So I think you have a nucleus of 5 or 6 senators there on the Republican side who Donald Trump is not necessarily going to be able to count on. And that's going to play a huge role in confirmation of appointees as these people go out the door or have to resign in disgrace. It's going to mean legislation. It's going to mean, in some instances, Republicans cooperating with investigations, whereas they did not do so in the past. So I think as we watch Donald Trump's bubble burst and as he careens out of control, becomes more and more hysterical, his poll numbers go down, the country is drifting, they're not getting their agenda through, I think you could see a mini revolt. I don't suppose that they're going to do anything extraordinary, but little steps lead to bigger steps, and bigger steps lead to who knows what. That
is true. And Jason Johnson, I think people often forget that the Senate Intelligence Committee is functioning as a bipartisan committee. Right. And with Republican support on that committee, they released these 2 very important reports today about Russian interference in the vote and how they targeted various voters in trying to discourage those voters. And so you have a nucleus there on the Senate Intelligence Committee that could spread as the evidence against the Trump administration mounts through Democratic-run congressional hearings in the House.
Right, Lawrence, the Senate has always played a very interesting role when it comes to the 2016 election. On the one hand, they won't protect Robert Mueller, right? They could pass a bill and make sure that Trump can't get rid of him. But on the other hand, they've been slowly but surely continuing the investigation into election interference in a way that the House has not. And I think as that evidence becomes more apparent, and also as people begin to realize Trump can't save you. Trump won't save you, right? And every man and woman is going to have to be for themselves. Not just Cory Gardner in Colorado, but Susan Collins is going to be in trouble. These senators are looking at what happened in 2018. They're looking at having had to defend Kavanaugh. They're looking at what could be a cratering economy. They're looking at scandal after scandal, and they're realizing that support for this president is not going to be beneficial. I agree with Comey. I wish more of these senators would stay and actually stand up for democracy instead of taking their ball and going home. But as they leave, it makes it harder for the existing Republicans to pretend that the Washington, D.C. isn't burning around this incompetent president.
And let's not overlook, Jennifer, this Republican Senate rebuke, joined by Democrats, of the Trump policy of basically cover-up on Saudi Arabia and the killing of Khashoggi.
Absolutely. There were 2 steps, actually. One was to directly blame Mohammed bin Salman in contradiction of the president, directly finger him after these embarrassingly non-credible briefings that they received from Mike Pompeo and from Jim Mattis. And the other was to actually take back power from the White House, to actually act within the context of the war powers and say, we will not consent to the use of our forces in Yemen, where a genocidal situation is building. It was extraordinary. That was a real rebuke, maybe the first actual legislative rebuke this president has received from Republicans.
Yeah, and so, Jason, the question is just, how good did that feel to those Republican senators? Hey, did that feel good? Because there's more if you want to.
I mean, I hope they recognize, like, well, wait, we have a job here. Right. Like, you can go back and you can actually rebuke this president. But I think the other thing is this, Lawrence, for so long, you had all these battles between Obama and the Senate and who's got more power and control. The Senate recognizes that they are an actual equal branch of our government, and they have an opportunity to set precedent and set policy, and they don't have to go down the drain with the President of the United States. And I think increasingly people are also recognizing that, look, with 17 investigations, as you mentioned, these investigations are eventually going to land in their laps, and the American people are going to demand accountability from the Senate in an oversight perspective. So I expect to see more of this going forward. I am not sure if I think that the president is going to get primaried yet, but I do believe this. If his numbers by the fall of 2019 are hovering regularly below 40%, I think a Bob Corker, I think a Lamar Alexander, I think not necessarily a Mitt Romney, but he will encourage people behind the scenes. We may see this president get primaried, and the most likely location for the person who's going to do that is going to be from the U.S. Senate.
And Jennifer, Bob Corker said today, he thinks I'm quoting him, he says, I think it's important to remind people that we're going through an anomaly right now as it relates to much of the standard Republican focus. And he's saying he is hoping that there will be a Republican primary against Donald Trump.
And her own weak little way, Susan Collins also said she wouldn't be opposed to primary candidates. There you go. That's about as bold as you're going to get from Susan Collins.
There's the crack in the wall. The primary is developing. Jennifer Rubin, Jason Johnson, thank you both for joining us. We'll be